by 20%. Also, turn on Japan. This is going to increase backlash on Japan. Japan's going to do the opposite of what they say because the the Democratic Party of Japan is like very, in a lot of ways, is very anti-U.S. and they're going to want to do whatever they can. The backlash is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to increase their overfishing. Furthermore, you can use this as an example when the U.S. tried to sign the UN Treaty of the Sea on the Japan backlash and they pulled out of it. Now impacts. First off, they talk about the Caribbean. They don't say how they're going to live to the Caribbean. All Caribbean is entirely different countries. That it doesn't include the U.S. They probably should specify what how it's going to affect the U.S. rather than include the Caribbean, since they don't get this impact. Also, they talk about mass extinction. This is a huge. They don't say how they're going to get to mass extinction. I don't see how overfishing is somehow going to magically lead to extinction and the decrease and the destruction of humanity. There are other food sources. Number one, number two, global warming is an alternate cause that's going to happen first. Anything else on this? No. Okay. Second off, advantages, natives. You can do both at the same time that the natives can do. If the natives can fish while the corporations fish at the same time, there's no reason why you can't do both, especially because the corporations are decreasing the fishing in the status quo, and natives only take up a small percentage of this fishing. Also, possibly the terminal defense on Hawaii, where we talk about there's going to be all causes, including global warming and pollution. There's going to be terminal defense that's going to destroy both of their advantages. Also, they talk about cultural decline. Cultural decline is increasing. Cultural rights for Native Americans is increasing in the status quo, especially in Hawaii because they're better taken by the Democratic legislature in order to ensure that the natives who have an intrinsic value to Hawaii and a large percentage of the population are going to be engaged and are going to have rights. Furthermore, just in general, the U.S. population is more to human rights. They have a great positive effect on human rights. We're increasing our view of equality in the status quo. This is going to mean that inevitably they're uniquely overwhelmed, that the uniqueness is turned and this advantage is rendered irrelevant. Also, I'll go to the links. Also, Native Americans will be co-opted by the giant corporations. Giant corporations have a ton of money. This is going to mean that co-options and everything going to be occurring because the Native Americans are going to be overwhelmed by the corporations and have a lot of money, and they're going to be basically bought off, and there's going to be increase and a continuation of overfishing. Now go to the cultural violence cost apply, how there's going to be increasing. There's an increase in positive view and legislation helping Native American culture. Also, they say whether we're targeting populations, we're not uniquely targeting this population, and we're targeting the general population in the passage. Just targeting this one population is going to change the entirety of the way we view the world, and whether we're targeting populations or not. Also, they say decrease value to life. This fishing is not going to be enough. Just because we decrease fishing, it's not going to mean we're going to turn and increase the value to life of Native Americans. It's just not going to be enough.
I would say on our moral imperative, this creates an obligation for the judge to weigh in with his personal opinion.
Oh yeah, this creates an obligation, Tyler, for you, the judge, to weigh in your personal opinions. That's not good because it increases judge intervention. It's not good.
And there's no way for us to predict that. You may buy the argument.
Oh yeah, there's no way to predict whether you will buy the argument or a different policy-oriented or K-oriented judge might not. Okay, now go to off case. First off, T is overfishing. A, the interpretation is that overfishing means to the brink of extinction. They don't specify this is to the brink of extinction. B is the violation. B is the violation. They don't specify that it's to the brink of extinction. C is the standard. 7 standards. First is predictability. This is we have to be predictable. We're predicting that they're going to talk about the extinction. Second is death over breath. When they talk about a specific issue, we're not going to be able. When they talk about the general issue, we're not going to be able to talk about specific issues that are necessary. C is ground. You're talking about specific grounds, but they're not able to engage in this kind of view of whether we have the proper ground or not. 4 is limits. That we have to have reasonable limits for this. And then 5 is reproducibility. When they talk about specific policies, they're not going to be enough. 6 is real world. They're not talking about real world. They're general real world specific policies. They're talking about specific policies. I'm just asking because they're talking about specific policy, as I said about parametricization. D is the voters' vote fairness, education is a priori. Now go to the K. We're running a deep ecology K. A is the inter. Utility calculations are right. They talk about utility policy calculations. They try to quantify things. This is really bad. We have to talk about intrinsic value. The intrinsic value of life adds, and this they're always going to reproduce human dominance. K is the impact to all framework arguments. This is to turn their entire case. Also, the other is about simulation of dilemmas. We have real world calculations. Prejudicial ego interests going to trap us into Western mindset. This is going to decrease the value of life that they talk about. We garner all their impacts from value of life.
Besides the fact that they're making this imperative that the Western culture gets to decide which cultures get to continue.
Yeah, also they talk about whether Western cultures continue to exist. That's not going to be enough, right?
No. The Western cultures are then deciding which
other
cultures.
The Western cultures are deciding which ones will exist. Sorry, you got a process. Also disco shift reality, when we talk about this is going to be a real world impact, we have to talk about what our ontology is. Also, ontology comes before ontology and methodology comes before policy. We have to consider what our ontology and bad ontology is. Bad policy that means in the communist regime, they had bad ontology, and bad policies that leads to terrible genocidal policies. Also, anthro framework for reproducing irreconcilable conflicts between the long-term presentation and the short-term econ developments. Also, reliable data is lacking Okay, B is the calculated framework leads to eugenics and extermination of the environmental in favor of econ development is especially true in a world where we're focused on econ, rather than actually talking about whether value of life and whether there's intrinsic quantifications. The next list is the U.S. federal government. The U.S. federal government is inevitably going to use policy rather than actually talking about. Also, third link is that they're going to use corporations. Both of these use think about policy and utility calculations in the capitalist mindset. Fourth link is that they use a capitalist mindset. This is going to mean that the capitalist mindset dehumanizes and turns everything into values and quantification. See if the impacts, harms, are reconstructed with moral utilitarian claims that rely on dominance of nature. Vote negative to reject the native birds and make ourselves feel less guilty. Two is this turns Kate's solvency today for problems only leads to the next problem. Managerial mindset, environmental problems continue to, as long as we accept human and environmental dualism. The third impact is that it destroys all value to life. This is going to come before that value of life because it turns our case. The alternative is vote neg and reject the mindset of human domination over natives. We are part of nature, and we are not its destroyer. Okay, so also nothing short of environmental consciousness can shift the solvency problems of the world, specifically true in this current day and age. Also, the chaos for real world reflection. We have to talk about this. This is going to be an off-air impact. Also, you can't term this is going to be severance. We make it an off-air voting issue. I'm going to go to dissent real quick. Sorry. Okay. Dissent, GOP backlash. Amazing is the GOP is really pissed off at the status quo. They don't want to be cornered. In terms of the sequester, they've already been cornered in the fiscal cliff because the link if the plan has the GOP will backlash and won't allow immigration and climate change legislation that will be passed. This is going to dehumanize and this is going to lead to starvation. The impact is going to decrease value of life. 0 point of the Holocaust is going to dehumanize the starvation. There's a high level. There's a high probability impact. The GOP is already very unhappy.
Starting cross-X now. Was the first thing you read a theory position about parametricizing?
Yeah, it's basically it's just a quick theory position.
Can you tell me the gist of it?
Yeah, sure. So we're saying that we were expecting and predicting that you were going to talk about the general resolution rather than a really, really specific policy that doesn't allow us doesn't allow us access to disads we would have ran otherwise regarding the general policy.
Okay.
On the K, what actions of the affirmative are you specifically critiquing?
For one thing, we're objecting to the way that every advantage that you guys actually provided moves eventually to being considered about how humans are affected by this.
Managerialism of the environment.
Yeah, so even your managerialism of the environment eventually becomes an issue for us, and it puts us in a position of deciding how the environment's going to be taken care of, and that as if we are people who can decide how nature works. Especially your.
Okay, that's fine. Can you read me your standards on your T? That's all I need. Just the timelines.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so first one, by the way, it's time, but I'll read the standards. First is predictability. Second is depth over breadth. Third is ground. 4 is limits. 5 is reasonability. 6 is real world. 7 is strategy. Cool.
All right. The order will be the first theory position that they read, then advantage 1, advantage 2, then the K, then the T, and then GOP backlash. So the theory position, advantage 1, advantage 2, the K, T, and then GOP backlash.
Awesome.
Okay, look, this is completely ridiculous. We're talking about exactly what the resolution asks us to do, which is to reduce overfishing through a policy. Literally, our plain text is a policy to reduce overfishing through slot size restrictions. They're telling you to vote on fairness in education at the point that they're able to engage in a fair debate because they're able to read 4 off and have educational value about the topic that we're asked to talk about. This is absolutely not a voter. They cannot prove any in-round abuse, so you should have an extremely high threshold for voting on this theory position.
If they didn't read this, if we did what they asked, they would just write spec on us.
Right, and if we did what they asked, they would have just read a spec argument, which means you shouldn't give them any leeway to getting out of this debate, actually talking about the educational topic that we're here to engage in by reading a bunch of dumb theory arguments. On advantage 1. They're completely mishandling what we're saying. We're saying that overfishing is happening in the status quo, in our uniqueness. We're telling you on our link story that we are